Okay, so remember like a while back when Adobe was trying to buy Figma for, I think it was like $20 billion?
Yeah, that was pretty big news for sure.
Yeah, and then it like totally fell apart and Adobe had to pay Figma $1 billion for like backing out.
It was kind of a wild situation.
And that got us thinking like, what if instead of trying to buy Figma Adobe had gone after a totally different company?
Like, who are we talking about?
What if they had gone after Framer?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like how would things be different right now if that had actually happened?
Well, we actually got our hands on some material that like explores that exact scenario, and like it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it really dives into this whole alternate reality and shows how like the whole design world could have gone in a totally different direction.
No, that sounds pretty cool.
And like the sources we looked at, they really make it clear that the regulatory stuff was a huge roadblock for the Figma deal.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, like all the concerns about, anti-competitive practices and too much consolidation in the market. Right, right. So like it's totally plausible that those same issues could have pushed Adobe to look at Framer instead.
That makes sense.
And if that had happened, Figma would have been on its own path too.
What do you mean?
Well, the sources kind of suggest that Figma might have just kept doing its own thing. Like they
Yeah.
could have like doubled down on their whole web-based platform and like maybe even gone public with an IPO to like really expand.
An IPO?
Yeah, it's totally possible.
Wow.
It's like, imagine Figma just growing and evolving independently without being absorbed by a giant company like Adobe.
I guess that could have been pretty interesting.
And some of the sources even hinted at Figma maybe expanding into other creative areas like, building on their strong community and branching out.
So like what? Like going head to head with like Adobe or something?
Who knows, really?
Yeah.
I mean, the possibilities are kind of endless.
Yeah, for sure.
But okay, let's like actually dive into the big what if here. Framer under the Adobe umbrella.
Okay, yeah, that's the juicy stuff.
So like the thing about Framer is that it's really good at bridging this gap between design and development, you know?
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
Like it's amazing for creating these high fidelity prototypes that are like super interactive.
Prototypes, right?
Yeah. And the best part is you don't need to be like a coding whiz to use it.
So it's like good for designers who aren't super technical.
Exactly.
I
And like Adobe with all their, powerful software, they could really use Framer to create a workflow that like really appealed to developers.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And the sources actually talk about this. They say that there could have been much tighter integrations between Framer and like all the classic Adobe tools.
Like what, like Photoshop and stuff?
Yeah, like Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, the whole shebang.
That would have been pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Can you like give me an example of what that might have looked like?
Okay, so imagine this. You're a designer,
Mm,
right?
okay.
You start with a visual concept in Photoshop.
Okay.
You refine the details in Illustrator.
Right.
And then you seamlessly bring those assets into Framer to add animations and like real interactive functionality.
Oh, wow.
Like the whole process from a static image to a working prototype, it could have been so smooth within the Adobe world.
So it's like taking those designs and making them actually do something.
Yeah, exactly. And the sources really emphasize this point. It's about going beyond just visual mock-ups and creating something that's genuinely interactive, like way earlier in the design process.
I see.
And imagine, like, what if Photoshop layers could be directly imported into Framer as interactive elements?
Oh, wow.
And like predefined animations from After Effects could just be applied seamlessly.
That would be insane.
Like that kind of integration could have been revolutionary for prototyping.
Yeah, that's like next level stuff.
For sure.
And there's another important point here that the sources bring up. It's like Framer wouldn't have overlapped with Adobe XD in the same way that Figma might have.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, like Framer's strength is in that high fidelity prototyping and making it easy to hand off designs to developers.
Right.
So it would have been more like a complement to Adobe XD, not a competitor.
Totally. And it's a totally different focus than Figma.
How so?
Well, Figma is all about like real-time collaboration across the entire design process.
Ah, okay, I get it.
Yeah, it's a different beast altogether.
And like, what if Adobe had actually put all its weight behind Framer?
Hmm.
Do you think it would have changed the skills that designers need?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think would be different?
Well, the sources suggest that designers might have been encouraged to learn more about code and interactivity.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone would have to become a coder.
No, not like that.
Okay, right.
It's more about like having a better understanding of the technology behind digital experiences,
Oh, I see.
like expanding their skill set to include a bit more technical know-how.
So not necessarily writing code from scratch, but like understanding how it works.
Exactly.
And like Adobe has so much power and resources, right?
Tons of it, yeah.
So do you think they could have like really pushed innovation in Framer if they had acquired them?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like how?
Well, the sources talk about things like AI-powered code generation, you know?
Wow, AI for code, that's crazy.
Right, and like expanding the libraries of pre-built components.
That would be super useful.
Totally. And also like deeper integration with all of Adobe's cloud services.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, innovation could have been like supercharged.
But I guess there's always like a flip side to these things, right? Like
Always.
what are some of the potential downsides that the sources mentioned?
Well, one thing is that integration can be tricky, you know?
Oh yeah, merging two companies is never easy.
Exactly. And there's always a risk of like diluting what makes Franger special in the first place.
Right, like losing that unique identity.
Yeah. And the sources also talk about how the target user base might have shifted a bit.
In what way?
Well, Framer already appeals to designers who like that intuitive visual interface, you know.
Yeah.
But under Adobe, that focus on a seamless no code-to-code workflow might have become even stronger.
I see.
So it could attract even more creatives who need to like quickly create and deploy stuff without getting bogged down in coding.
So like people making marketing websites and prototypes and things like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the what if scenario, but what about the real world?
Right.
Like Framer still exists even without Adobe, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So how have they like made a name for themselves?
One of the big things is their interface, you know?
Oh yeah, what's so special about it?
It's just so designer friendly.
Okay.
Like the sources describe it as being really intuitive, especially for people coming from like a print or editorial design background.
Okay, I see.
Like it uses a grid-based layout and visual interactions that feel very familiar.
That makes sense.
And this is where it's different from something like Webflow.
Oh yeah, how so?
Webflow can be a bit more geared towards people with a development background.
Okay.
It kind of expects you to understand things like the CSS box model from the get-go.
That sounds a bit more technical.
Yeah, whereas Framer tries to keep those technical details a bit more hidden.
So it's like more approachable for designers.
Exactly.
And another thing the sources emphasize is how easy it is to deploy projects with Framer.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like you can just publish stuff directly without needing a complicated hosting setup.
Right. It's like designed to live.
It's a catchy phrase.
I know, right?
And it makes it perfect for things like marketing, websites, blogs, portfolios.
Yeah, anything where you need to get something up and running quickly and make a strong visual impact.
And I've also heard that Framer's really good at incorporating new technologies.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely on the cutting edge.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, the sources mention things like AI-powered tools and new code elements.
Wow, that's pretty advanced.
Yeah. It's really cool because it lets designers create these sophisticated layouts and interactions without having to write tons of code.
Oh, that sounds great.
But there's a caveat.
What's that?
The sources do point out that some of the more advanced features can have a bit of a learning curve.
Oh, okay. So it's not all like drag and drop and super easy.
Not for every single feature,
And
no,
it's
but it's still a very powerful set of capabilities.
And just to like wrap up the comparison with Webflow,
Yeah.
it seems like Framer is more about being intuitive and design focused.
Totally.
And Webflow is more for people who are comfortable with or want more control over the code.
That's a good way to put it.
So even without Adobe Framer has really carved out a nice spot for itself.
Yeah, they're definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Especially for designers who want ease of use and the ability to quickly create visually stunning interactive projects.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so let's take a step back and think about the bigger picture.
Sure.
Like, what if Adobe had gone with Framer instead of Figma? How would that have affected the design world as a whole?
That's a great question.
Like, the sources talk about some pretty interesting ripple effects.
Yeah, let's unpack those.
So what are some of the things they mentioned?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up is this idea of designers needing to evolve their skill set.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that a bit earlier.
Right, but it's like a recurring theme.
I see.
Whether it's through an acquisition or just the natural progression of design tools, it seems like designers are increasingly expected to have some understanding of code and interactivity.
So it's like a trend that's not going away.
Not at all.
And the sources also suggest that we might have seen a clearer division of tools in the market.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Like Figma would have become the go-to for collaborative design workflows.
Right.
And Adobe Framer would have been the leader in high-fidelity prototyping and web deployment.
So like a more specialized landscape.
Exactly.
I like that.
And here's something I found really encouraging.
What's up?
No matter what happened, competition would have driven innovation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like whether Figma stayed independent or Framer joined Adobe, they would all been pushing each other to create better and better software.
And that's good for everyone, right?
It benefits the entire design community.
Absolutely.
So it's really all about having choices, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Like this whole alternate scenario shows how different decisions could have led to a more diverse set of tools for designers and developers.
Yeah, more specialized solutions for different needs.
Exactly.
I like that.
Okay, so just to summarize this whole what if thing,
Yeah,
we're imagining a world where Adobe couldn't buy Figma because of those regulatory hurdles,
right.
and instead they decided to acquire Framer.
Okay.
And our discussion has shown how that could have led to a more code-centric approach within Adobe,
Yeah.
potentially with tighter integrations between their software
Yeah.
and a different competitive landscape.
And a bigger push for designers to learn more technical skills.
Yeah, all that stuff.
It's pretty wild to think about.
It really is.
So for you, the listener, the takeaway here is to think about how these potential shifts help us understand the current state of the design world.
Right? Like why certain tools exist and what makes them valuable.
Exactly.
And it also gives us a glimpse into the crazy world of tech acquisitions.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And how those decisions can have a real impact on the software we use every day.
Big time.
So this whole thought experiment really raises an interesting question, doesn't it?
Yeah, like what?
Well, Framer is really good at bridging that gap between design and code, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Adobe has all these resources and influence.
True.
So, how might their combined power have accelerated the adoption of interactive and code-driven design workflows?
Oh, that's a good one.
Especially compared to the path we're on now.
Right.
It's something to really think about, how different strategic choices can shape the future of design.
Totally. And the tools that'll shape that future.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about the software itself, but the bigger forces at play.
The ripple effects.
The ripple effects, exactly.
That's a good way to put it.
So yeah, there's a lot to ponder here.
For sure.
And we'll have to keep watching to see how things unfold.
Absolutely. The design world is constantly evolving.
So who knows what the future holds?
Only time will tell.
But it's definitely going to be exciting.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Me too.
Well, this has been a great discussion.
It really has.
I always enjoy these deep dives.
Me too. It's fascinating to explore these what-if scenarios.
And who knows? Maybe one day we'll be looking back at this conversation and saying, wow, we were right on the money.
Or maybe totally wrong.
Either way, it's fun to speculate.
Exactly. So thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all you listeners out there, thanks for tuning in.
We catch you next time.
See you then. Bye.